That's important. That's like having a child, right?
That means you can go on another vacation, right?
It's as expensive as having a child.
No, they were tough negotiators.
All right, no answer, so he must be on his way. But it's 10:30, so we're gonna get started.
Did you turn on
Right here.
did you turn it on?
Yes. We'll call the meeting to order and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. And let the minutes reflect that Board of Works member Gross is absent. That's subject to change. But we'll start out with that
Maybe there's a
notation. We'll start with the minutes from the April 9th session. I did go through those. George, did you see any changes?
I didn't see any changes. They look good, so I'll make a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
Okay. I'll second that. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right. Okay, again, welcome all our visitors, department heads. I do have a guest here from Grace College, Sarah Chappelle. She's a senior at Grace. Junior at Grace, and she's just shadowing me this morning, and we've had a lot of good discussion, and appreciate her being here. I think we're kind of overwhelming her with all our details here, so. But Sarah, thank you for coming. Appreciate Grace College reaching out and setting that up. So, any other guests here? Councilman Fresh isn't here, he's not here, all right. Jack's here. All right, no unfinished business, let's go into new business. And actually, we're going to start with special claims, item number 9, and bring those back around and approve those or consider those, because one of those has to do with our first item here, and we don't want to go through the first item without having the approval here. It's just a $750. Is that an application fee?
Yes.
Okay. So this is to Old National Bank. These are special claims, $750 to Old National Bank, and then Umball, which we'll talk about later, is $43.70.76. Those are additional fees that we will ask to amend, but we'll get those claims approved, and then we'll ask for the amendment to do that. So, is there a motion to approve the special claims as presented?
So moved.
Okay, I'll second that. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right.
Thanks.
So, item number 1 is our lease agreement or installment agreement with Old National Bank regarding the purchase of the emergency radios. We went through the process and approved their proposal as the lowest percentage rate, and we're happy that that was able to be done locally. Excuse me. So today is just basically presenting the contract from that agreement for your approval, and we want to get the documents signed. So again, that $750 you just approved would be applicable to this if you do approve it. So, Lynn, anything to add on this?
When we received the quote for the radio equipment from J&K, who's going to be installing the equipment and providing it, they had included a lease agreement with a bank in their community, and that interest rate was at 3.35. So I decided to check around with other banks locally, and we had any kind of rate between 2.59 and 3.96, and Old National came in then at the end at 2.98, and they were the lowest bid on the quote, so we decided to go with them. And in fact, one of the other banks said we should jump on that rate, so
Yeah.
that's where we're at today.
And I appreciate, Lynn, your suggestion to do that. Again, doing that locally helps everybody out in this community. Chris Hansen is here representing Old National. I don't know If you really have anything to say, you're just bringing the documents in, but thank you for your assistance with this. And most importantly, hey, we got the best rate available and we got it locally, so that's the good news. So I'm just, again, asking for your approval of this lease agreement. It's a 3-year. The interest rate was I had it on here, 2.988%, spread out over a 3-year period.
Correct.
And this is going to allow we had the discussion and the approval of the purpose of this, the upgrading of our emergency radios, which will allow us, obviously, more consistent communication over a larger area, and most importantly, during emergencies, we'll have that reliability that we found was a little bit questioned when we did our exercise. So again, that decision's already been made. We've already approved the lease with Old National. Now it's just a matter of approving this document, the contract itself, which I know you read all 68 pages.
I did.
All right. Okay.
It was amazing. Banking regulations are amazing, 68 pages. Anyway, kudos to Lynn for shopping it around. It's always nice to go local to taxpayers' money, so I'll move to approve the installment purchase agreement.
And I will second that. And in fairness to Chris, it wasn't all 68 pages of banking. A lot of it was they had to include all the details on the radios, and that was many, many pages as well. So, all right, so motion on the floor. Further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, passes.
Great. Did you want to go ahead and sign those documents now? So
I think we can.
Okay.
Chris, you want to bring those documents up? We'll get them signed and get you on your way. I just got a text message. Jeff won't be here. Jeff does? You need all of them? Then I'll have him come.
Jennifer, is Jeff going to come in later today?
Jeff will be here at the
maybe.
meeting today at 3:30, 3:15, 3:30.
He's coming in?
He's coming in.
Okay.
to meet with me.
I just they have a school issue, so.
You step under that.
So Mr. Hanson, Board Member Gross will be in later today.
All right.
Do you want to leave the papers here so I can get his
We'll
signature?
get them all signed, and then she'll get his name on there as well, and then we'll get them back to you.
Everywhere they will.
Yep. Well, Lynn, believe me, Lynn's very good about that.
You and Jeff have to sign this one.
All right.
Well, since he's coming out, I'll wait till.
Yeah, we can just, and then I'll just drop them off after Jeff gets them signed this afternoon. Is that okay?
Yep.
Okay. Sorry about that.
That's all right. Oh, we appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Chris. All right. Item number 2 is an amendment to our agreement with UMBAL regarding our comprehensive financial plan. The city is looking into the future at just again looking at aligning our capital improvement plan, trying to develop a financial plan that UMBAL has been working on. We've exceeded, because of the complexity, we've exceeded the amount. So we're asking for an additional amount up to $30,000, not to exceed $30,000. We haven't spent that. We don't know how much we'll spend. We've exceeded the amount by $43,7076. So that's the immediate need is to cover that. And depending on how much further we need to go with this, that may be the last payment, or we may incur more to do that. But again, we're looking at having a comprehensive financial plan and a capital improvement plan that gives the city a real advantage when we go to bond. The first thing the individuals that call on a rating call is they want to know if you have a capital improvement plan and a financial plan, and how formal it is. And by doing this will formalize that and give us that advantage that we have had a consultant examine our books and look 5 years into the future. And the ratings typically, your rating, we're AA minus now. There's certainly that potential to improve that, which also then can lower the bond rate. If you have a higher ranking, your credit rating is higher, then you get basically that lower interest rate on a bond. So it all makes sense to do. Plus, the amount of projects that we've got going in the city, it's important. Just got 2 more road projects that we're going to need to look at funding for over the next 5 years. So it's good to have that formalized so that, you know, the council has a pretty good idea where we're heading. So I would just ask for your approval to amend that agreement.
So moved. So,
All right, I'll second. Any further discussion or questions? All in favor say aye.
aye.
Aye. Those opposed? All right. I've asked Stacy to give you an explanation of this next item. Anytime there's a company called Zix, I'm out. and Stacy is in. So if you can explain what's going on here, what we're asking the Board of Works to consider today?
Sure. So our email encryption service is through Zix. That was approved, I want to say 5 or 6 months ago. And at the time, the service is provided by Zix, but the payment and everything administratively was handled through Google. We received notification a few weeks ago that Google is changing how that operates. So Google is no longer going to be that middleman, third party involved. And while they still approve and partner with Zix on this encryption service for their email, they are going to transfer all of the administrative end of things to Zix. And so as a result of that, we need to sign or approve new terms and conditions directly with Zix. They're essentially the same ones that we signed before, but those were directly with Google. These will be directly with Zix. And then we're also giving them inherently permission to have Google transfer the rest of our payment for the year that we are currently under agreement for to Zix to continue that service for us seamlessly. So I'm just asking for your approval of those new terms and conditions with Zix directly so that we can get all of that transferred over and continue that at the end of the month when they make the change.
And again, as was explained, we've already prepaid for this, so it's just a matter of now aligning their terms and conditions. We will consider their payment terms at the next, whenever that comes.
When our renewal date comes up, yes.
So this is just switching from basically Zix to back to Zix, correct?
Right. The product's always been from Zix. It's just Google was the one that we paid before. They handled the administrative end of things with the terms and conditions. And now all of that is going to Zix. They're still a Google partner, but Google is just kind of letting go of the administrative part of that and letting them handle that moving forward.
And we need to take this action because they'll drop us at the end of the month if we don't, so.
Right.
All right.
Right.
I'll move to approve. Thank you, Stacy.
I'll second that. Further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. All right. The next item of business is a contract with Design Collaborative. Justin?
Okay, so attached for your approval is an agreement between the City of Warsaw and Design Collaborative in the amount of $42,000. It's a proposal to gather community input and develop a comprehensive plan for Central Park. This master plan will include a multi-use facility that would incorporate an ice skating rink in the winter months, a multi-use facility that offers winter recreational activity has been talked about for numerous years in the community. This master planning process is the first step to making that become a reality. The funds needed for this project will be raised through a partnership with K21 Foundation and 2 city departments. The K21 Foundation will be providing a grant in the amount of $14,000. The Parks Department will contribute $5,000, and the remaining $23,000 will be contributed by the Planning Department. And I've attached a letter from the K21 Foundation that shows their commitment to this project.
Thanks, Justin.
Yeah.
So, with the Buffalo Street project and the changes that will be occurring down on Buffalo Street, part of the Buffalo Street project involves a new plaza that will be built at the end of Buffalo Street as part of that project. That was a project that's coming from the Regional Cities grant. Obviously, we want to maintain that integrity of our parks and that interface with the Buffalo Street project and the parks. The Parks Department has been involved in all the planning of that and engineering of that plaza. The Parks Department approved this contract at their meeting the other night unanimously. There's a lot of moving parts down in the park. As we extend Indiana Street around to Buffalo, it will eventually require the relocation of the park offices. And we've known that from the beginning. Where are we going to relocate the park offices? We've had, NIPSCO came to us a few years ago and told us that they're going to upgrade that station, that substation down there. And essentially what they'll do is they'll shrink it down to about a quarter of the size of that lot. They'll reduce the height of that substation by about half. So it will open up a significant amount of property that the current substation is on. In fact, all the property that substation is on will be available to the parks to use. So with the potential to move the parks office, the potential to add on or incorporate that with the garage down there, the maintenance shed, we need to look at holistically the entire amount of property that's available in the park as we move these things around. It was mentioned at the Parks meeting the other night, there's been a potential opportunity to purchase the gas station on the corner. We're looking into that. That would open up some room to do some other things, could potentially extend parking. It could allow for potentially an extension of the gardens in that area, certainly clean up an eyesore, but again, how do you use that piece of property? There's been discussion to look at the pavilion and how we can enhance the current pavilion. Potentially the park offices could be in the pavilion, along with, Justin did mention the multi-purpose outdoor area that could be used as a picnic shelter event area in the summertime, could double as a skating rink, a project that was brought up by KLA a few years ago. It's been certainly a discussion point with the foundation, K21. There's a desire to create some outdoor recreational opportunities in our community in the wintertime. The KLA project, I think, pretty much kick-started that again. There's been a lot of discussion about it. So we've visited countless facilities. We've looked at the costs. We've looked at the footprints. And what we're asking Design Collaborative to do is now engage the community to determine what their designs and desires are for the Central Park area as we have this availability of property, some realignment of the buildings and the roads. Another area I didn't mention is along the shoreline. There's some discussion on whether or not the pier might need to be reevaluated. We've got some E. coli problems down there because that pier doesn't allow water to circulate, and because it's shallow and it's warm facing the sun, we've had to close the beach down at times due to the E. coli problem. And that was referenced in the Lakes and Streams study that looked at that several years ago. So we know we've got an issue down there. With the Buffalo Street project, with the Buffalo Street Plaza down there, you know, the talk with Larry, the Parks Department, Recreation is potentially changing and creating more opportunities down at the lake shore, where certainly we would maintain our swimming beach, but you know, we could potentially do more recreational opportunities on the lake, be it kayaks or paddle boats or fishing clinics or, you know, areas along the pathway there between Buffalo Street and the pavilion. So the idea is to look at the pavilion as a whole. We've looked at the pavilion and feel like it's a very solid structure. It's got a great historic value to the community, and we certainly will retain that. But can we enhance that with additional space? Can we make some redesign? Do we put offices in there? How do we program it? There's a lot of opportunity at the parks with the property coming up, with the recreational opportunities, with the Buffalo Street Plaza, with the acquisition of that property coming available, with the pavilion itself. So we felt, actually the park department felt it would be important, the park board felt it would be important to bring in, similar to what we did with the Ride Walk Master Plan, and engage the community to come down and tell us what they like about Central Park, which Central Park is the heart of our community, our city. We're fortunate to have a lakefront park being overlooked by our global orthopedic company and within a couple blocks of our downtown. So we've got a ton of opportunity to really enhance this, and with the construction and land acquisition going on, we want to make sure we do it right. So there's a lot of ideas floating, none of which have been determined. We want that public input so that we can then go back to the park board and say, based on the several public meetings we've had, the input that we've gotten, you know, this is what the public has told us they want. And then we can try and take those pieces and shuffle them around to meet the needs of the public and to maintain the integrity of the pavilion and the park. So I know that's probably a lot more than you had in here, Justin, but we've been evolving and working towards this, and we just think it makes a lot of sense to kind of look at our options and now bring the public on and say, okay, these are options. What do you like? What don't you like? What have we done well? What do we need to do more of? Does this sound like a good idea? And we go from there. So, Jeremy, any thoughts on that? I know, Larry, I asked you to make a few comments from the Parks Department side of it.
No, I think you touched on everything, Joe, and we would just like to see that master plan with all the moving parts to make it work. And you know, we're excited about a lot of opportunities that we have in the park, and I think this is a great first step towards that.
I'll just say that we don't know what the NIPSCO property is going to end up, but that's what the planning process is here for. Is we want to be prepared that if there is an opportunity, we're ready to take advantage.
It's wonderful we have a community foundation that helps pay for this too. They recognize everything the mayor said.
Yeah, K21 recognizes the importance of healthy lifestyles in our community and certainly want to participate in that. So, yeah, I agree with you, George. It's nice to have that support and that mission of their foundation. So that really is kind of where we're at. Questions or comments, Justin? Anything else?
I think you covered it.
I'll move to approve the planning contract for design.
And I will second that. And again, the only discussion I would have is that, you know, again, they're going to go out and do a lot of public Q&A sessions. They're going to do social media polling. I think we're going to use the Lakes Festival as a venue to distribute surveys and take input this summer, which is
Next month.
Memorial Day weekend. Yeah, so we'll have 3 days down there to gather information, and then we'll use more than likely the Parks Department, Safety Day and the Parks Department meetings as kind of the venue for public meetings. So that's the important part. Then they'll go back and take all that information and just, it'd be more of a feasibility study. It would give us an idea what could go where, what would make sense to go where, and probably, I would assume it'll give us some rough costs to do that. And then, you know, then the real work begins after that. But, so, there's been a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right. Thank you. Justin, thank you. All right, Jeremy, Husky Trail, continue to pay
Yeah.
off our new road.
Yeah, hopefully we'll wrap this project up. Obviously, with it falling later in the year, there were some things we have to do to finalize that, including walking this week in 29-degree weathers, the entire trail to make sure all the sod was still growing. So as we finalize those final few details, this is the pay application 14 in the construction inspection for the amount of $2,066.72, and it's an 80/20, so we'll pay out the $2,000, a little over $2,000 being reimbursed, 80% of that. So I would just ask for your approval of that pay application.
Anyone have any questions? It looks like you're within a couple thousand of being done with the front.
Yeah, we've submitted the NOT, which is it's a notice of intent that we're completed with the sod. Like I said, we walked the entire project, and the sod appears to be growing. Obviously, at this time of year, we'd hoped it would have been greener, but there was still snow on the ground. But hopefully, we can finalize this project here shortly.
All right, George, any questions?
No, I'll move to approve the pay application.
I will second that. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Thank you. Just to give you an update, we did finalize the right-of-way for Market Street. And as we stand right now, we're still projecting to hit that July 11th letting date that the Market Street project will be let. So we're still hoping to start construction this year.
Wonderful. All right, thank you. Brian, got a pay application?
This is a pay application for Selge. This is pay app number 1 for the sewer replacement portion of all the rehab work we're doing this summer. It's been reviewed by James and our department and Wessler and the clerk's office, and we're recommending payment.
All right,
I'll move to approve.
I'll second that. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right.
Thank
thanks,
you.
Brian. Jennifer, you've got a new hire report?
We do, we just have one. Actually, it's not new hire, it would just be evaluation, just an increase recommended by the clerk.
Change in payroll.
Correct.
All right. No questions?
No, I'll move to approve.
Second. Further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right. And travel requests are pretty self-explanatory. There's, Brian, you got a couple guys going to Streeter, Illinois for a Vector conference. Wrong Brian.
Brian Davison. That's funny.
Yes, it's a sort of a twofold trip. Our new truck is going down the assembly line, so the guys will actually be able to see our new truck being built. It should be delivered here in the next few weeks. Then it's also an opportunity to get some factory training on some of the new features of the truck, so.
Okay. All right.
So
I'm
no-
sorry, Brian. Sherwin.
We've got two gentlemen from our department that are actually our gang officers going to the MGIA National Gang Conference here in South Bend for a continuing education and a networking.
All right. All right, any questions?
Nope, I'll move to approve the travel request.
All right. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? I did second that too, by the way, sorry.
I heard.
All right. And then we've done our special claims, so we've got the claims dockets. Lynn, any comments?
I do not have any comments.
George, anything you saw?
I looked over and didn't see anything for further review,
All right.
so I'll make a motion, if Lynn's okay, to accept the claims docket.
I will second that. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right. I've just got one more thing, and I think we've kind of been made aware of this, but Norfolk Southern approached us a couple months ago and told us that they were going to come into our community along our north-south line and replace the rail. The rails, some of the rail's been in there since the 30s. They estimate the rail in the county is anywhere from, 60 to 80 years old. So maybe 50, I think it was early 70s was the last rail they put down. But at any rate, that rail is old, and they want to come in and lay quarter-mile sections of rail. And this rail, actually, interestingly enough, is being produced over in Whitley at SDI. They will load the rail, I think they go to Fort Wayne and come around, and then they will come up the Norfolk Southern tracks. They will start in north of Claypool. That whole Claypool area has been redone with their interchange there. So they'll actually start north of Claypool. I don't think they're going to involve Claypool. We have been meeting with Scott Tilden from the county, Jeff, our guy, and the Milford folks with Norfolk and Southern to try and coordinate this project. It's a pretty significant project, and it's basically going to be done in 2 phases. And the first phase will actually start next week. Now, we have sent out a press release to everybody that we assume will be broadcast or printed or generated soon to give some of the general details of the project. The problem is that the timing and the actual closures of the crossings are all subject to the schedule of Steel Dynamics loading those rails, them getting up here. There's independent crews that will be in this summer. So there's many different schedules from a railroad perspective, from the Norfolk and Southern, that have to be coordinated. And while they have dates that will be listed, there's also there's going to be unannounced closings. I mean, it'll just happen. We're being told they typically will only take a short time for depending on the phase. The details, again, we can get into in a minute, but there's going to be some unexpected, unannounced closings that are going to require the patience of our motorists. We're working with the railroad to try and minimize that disruption, but I'm not going to tell you it's going to be something that we can tell you exactly when it's closing and exactly when it's going to open up. Because if you think about it, you got a train that's a quarter-mile long, and it's going to go slow, and it's going to drop that rail off the back. But you got a quarter-mile section of rail being laid down, you got a quarter-mile train. They're going to block more than one intersection. There's just no question about it. So how long? How quick? So the idea, phase 1, which starts Monday, they'll start north of Claypool on Monday, and they will come up just south of Pope Street. So that shouldn't affect our local crossings, because the first train will have the rail that will stretch that far. Then they've got to go back, and they've got to go back to Steel Dynamics and load the second train, and then turn around and come back. And we don't know how long that's going to take. If we were down by Claypool, I could look you in the eye and say it's starting Monday. You'll probably have some short closures on Monday, and that's it. But they will end just before they get to Warsaw. We don't think they will involve Pope Street. We think that the train will be done, the rail will be laid, but that long quarter-mile train could still block crossings or create a real slow-moving train. So all I can tell you is probably next week there could be some slow trains that hopefully won't create too much angst, but I know how impatient I get sometimes. So the idea is hopefully they should be, when they get to a crossing, it only takes, what, Stacy, 15 minutes? They're coming through and they're trenching right now. You can go down to Hickory Street and see where they're trenching, and they will put they will lay the rail down in the trench at the crossings and cover it with asphalt. so that those crossings, while they're waiting to lay the rail, which isn't gonna happen until July, that rail will be buried at the crossings so that it won't impact the crossings for 3 months, 2 months, thankfully. So the laying of the rail should be quick, should not take long, but the first train will have to go back to Steel Dynamics, and we don't know how long it'll take them to get loaded. They will come back to Warsaw and go through the city. It could be as early as next Thursday or Friday. It could be another week or two after that. It just depends on what they run into. So Stacy will be working directly with the Norfolk Southern, and your comments are that they've at least been pretty responsive. As details emerge, they're getting you involved right away. And she will turn around and get out specific dates and times and anticipated delays. So that will probably happen in the next couple weeks sometime. We'll just have to keep an eye on it. Hopefully when there are disruptions locally, they will be short, but there will be delays, slow-moving trains, and I'm sure some stoppages. So that's phase one. That's just dropping the product off. Come June 25th, they will start in Claypool. They will bring a gang of track layers into the community that will work 4 10-hour days. And they will start in Claypool, and as they come through these intersections, the closing time of those intersections was approximately
2 to 3 hours.
2 to 3 hours. But remember, you've got long sections of rail. They won't be up to Warsaw until probably July 2nd is their tentative date to start down on Pope Street. So that's going to create some closings. They're again, should typically only be a few hours. But the railroad has decided that they also want to put in some conduit between Market and Lion Street, I believe, to facilitate new safety crossings that I've been talking about for 5 years that they've been delaying on, and they were supposed to start earlier this year. Those safety improvements to the crossings require this conduit. The safety improvements will begin a separate project at the end of the year, or probably in the fall. But we can minimize the disruption with that if we do lay the conduit for all those to connect to each other. So they'll be laying conduit to connect all those new crossings along with laying the rail. They're going to do it at the same time. But that's going to create some pretty significant closures for 1 to 2 weeks in the city, and multiple closures. We'll have a better idea in July of that when that happens. But it's going to happen hopefully around the 4th of July holiday. School won't be in session. We will have detours, but Center Street will be closed for probably a few days. Market Street hopefully will be closed for less than that. But all that work has to be done, and the railroad has decided they're going to do it all at the same time. 2 separate projects. The rail is from North Claypool to county line, and the second project is the conduit for the new safety improvements for the new crossings, which will be done simultaneously between Market and Lion. Jeff? Market and Main, okay. The bulk of our, Fort Wayne will not be involved in that, correct?
Not the conduit part, but it
Right.
may be involved when they ripped out the rail.
Gotcha. So, all of that information will be involved in the press release that was sent out. We will be constantly updating. I would certainly ask our friends at the press to we can't say too much about how important it is that the public understand what's going on, and try and improve everyone's patience as this happens. Norfolk Southern decided, they called it a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for us. So that's the way we're looking at it, because we have no other choice. And we have to work with their schedules, their crews, their gangs, their crossings. But we're gonna do everything we can to get the information out from our office. The county will have all that information. Jeff, I know you sat in those meetings. Anything else you might add to that? Okay. Jeremy, Stacy, anything we need to talk about more?
I would just say that emergency services are involved, they're going to be in the loop on all of this. I know there may be some resident concerns about emergency services if we have trains stopped or crossings closed for extended periods of time. We're going to be coordinating that to make sure that service time isn't impacted so that they're aware. Norfolk Southern is already working with dispatch to handle the small closings that they've been doing, and they'll continue to do that. And then the other point is just that by them laying these longer pieces of rail and welding them together, they're eliminating joints, which should eventually eliminate a lot of the maintenance that has been having to take place up to this point, because there have been a lot of little pieces and segments and joints that loosen up and cause problems. And so this hopefully will minimize future maintenance through this stretch in the community, to where we won't see kind of unexpected closures to do repairs from what they've communicated to us.
So the silver lining is that by Market Street getting delayed, it's actually gonna help us in this, because with Center Street being closed for a while, we'll have the use of Market Street. Had we been in construction with the Market Street project, I'm not sure what we would have done. So there is a slight silver lining to this, that our delay in Market Street is actually, and again, of course, we just found out, 8 weeks ago about this project. I mean, certainly we didn't, Market Street was started about 4 or 5 years ago, and this project just came up 2 months ago. But obviously the railroad, and again, it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, but they will be doing it, and we're just going to have to roll with it. So, but next week, potentially towards the end of the week, our city crossings could be affected, but we will get the information out as soon as we know, to try and improve everybody's understanding of when it is. Emergency services, the school corporation's been involved. I have to say Norfolk and Southern has been good about sitting down at the table and giving us the expectation, but the unfortunate part is the schedule is static, and we don't think this is the type of project that'll be weather dependent. So, rain won't hurt this project. Even heat, I don't think is gonna be an issue. It's just, they're gonna get up and work 10 hours a day for 4 days, and hopefully knock this thing out. That's all we can hope for. But the city's doing everything they can to stay ahead of it, to try and involve our citizens in emergency services and schools with the knowledge that they're gonna need. But most importantly, we just ask that folks be understanding that there's gonna be unexpected things that come up. So, any questions? Yes, sir.
Will new rail lines result in faster trains?
I think it's just gonna be safer. What's the speed? There is a speed limit through town because of Hickory Street, 35. So they have to slow down to come into the community.
There's a couple of reasons why that speed, because there's also intersection time and intersection, and then you have the fact that you have the curve on the rail. The crossing improvements that we're making is the other reason for the current speed, with the crossing arms going on Center Street, Main Street, Fort Wayne Street, Market Street. That will help, but there's still some other factors that limit their speed.
Something that they did explain is that with all of these crossings being able to communicate with each other, it could make those crossings a little bit more effective. In other words, those gates will be down potentially shorter times, only the appropriate time, and maybe not down as long, instead of just these independent crossings.
The project itself, and I think the reason why
Norfolk Southern has chosen to replace the rail. We have kind of 3 different projects going on. One, we have the crossing improvements grant that we'd gotten, 3 or 4 years ago now. You have the Hickory Street improvements that will be done as a part of the traffic signal replacement that NDOT's going to be doing. And that traffic signal replacement is tied into the crossing arms, the crossing improvements that will be made. So all those projects coming together, I think in terms of Norfolk Southern, it made sense for them at this point to replace those tracks so they didn't have to come back and do it at a later date. So all these projects are kind of tying in together. The traffic signal improvements will be tied to the gates, the railroad gates, the railroad crossing arms, and that whole system, which is the reason for the conduit. They're going to lay that conduit now, knowing that those arms are coming later this year, and at the same time knowing that the system that they're going to tie in, that NDOT's going to tie into with the traffic signals, will all be tied to each other so they can communicate better, which ultimately should improve some of the flow of traffic as those trains come through in the future. So there's a lot of different pieces, a lot of different projects, which I think is what really made Norfolk Southern say this would be the perfect time to replace those rails rather than having to come back 5 or 6 years later and do it. So a lot of different projects tying all together, which will hopefully improve the safety and the traffic flow as those projects occur. Now, the NDOT project won't occur until, I believe, 2021, 2022, somewhere in that time frame. But they're currently in the design phase now. So over the next few years, a lot of those improvements will hopefully improve safety at the railroad crossings as well as traffic flow through the railroad crossings.
Jeremy, give an example of how the NDOT crossing, say for example on Center Street, how that would potentially help Center Street clear out with a lot of backup from the train.
Yeah, Jeff actually probably knows a little bit more about this. It's how they communicate with each other. But the other safety mechanism that's going to come into play once when NDOT does their traffic signal is there will be 2 traffic signals, so the people will actually be stopped prior to the tracks on Center Street so that you can't actually cross. One of the issues we've had is people sitting on the tracks when there's a red light. That will no longer be possible with the new traffic signal improvements that NDOT will be made, and they'll communicate with the traffic signal and traffic arm. I think there's a term for that.
Preemption.
Preemption, yeah. So they're in the process of designing all that, and all those will eventually tie together. It's just going to take us a few years. NDOT and the railroad and our projects take a few years to tie that all together. But once it does, the safety and the traffic flow will be vastly improved, I feel.
And this all started in 2013 when we requested some improvements along, and initially they gave us I think it was about $900,000 to do 3 intersections. And when they came up and looked, they go, you got a bigger problem than that. They started looking at Hickory Street, they started the safety on Hickory Street, then they decided, and that's why we were delayed. Those funds were approved in 2013 and hopefully will finally be spent, about double that will be spent at the end of this year. But when they came up and started looking at our situation here, the proximity to State Road 15, the problem with Hickory Street where you got a freight train going 35 miles an hour down through a neighborhood, safety became a big concern. And they decided to expand the project to all intersections, to communicate all of those crossing improvements, and then to involve NDOT to try and preempt the traffic signals so that we can improve safety for traffic and also improve the safety on the crossings. And it just, that's why it's taken now almost 5 years to get those safety improvements done, but the original scope of the project has expanded tremendously. So I think the community will be a benefactor of that, huge benefactor as this all gets done. So, sorry to keep you all waiting. Mike obviously had someplace to go. Anybody else have anything?
Earth Week next week, and city is offering expanded services. We have a free community shred day at the street department Monday from 10 to 4. They can drop stuff off. We have large leaf pile pickup all next week. Have it out on your trash day, and Borden is doing that, or the recycling part, we're doing leaves, and Waste Management is offering dumpsters at their facility by Biomet. Zimmer Building, and if you show your ID that has your address on it, you can dump extra goods and trash in their dumpsters at no cost. So that's next week only.
All right, that's great.
Okay,
Motion to adjourn?
thank you.
Thank